the Labour MP and Health Minister, Andy Burnham. Welcome to the programme.
Hello there.
Incredibly important speeches for both Mr Blair and Mr Brown next week. Calls from the Brownites in the papers this morning for Mr Blair to anoint him as his successor. Will he do that?
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting week, and actually the events we've not been a great few weeks for the Labour Party, but those events actually I think have flushed out some of the rumblings, and I actually think we're looking forward to a better conference, actually quite a good conference. I think you'll see a lot of emotion, there'll be a lot of feeling around the place, and actually I'm thinking it'll be quite a good week for Labour. But
the issue of the succession is still unresolved, though, isn't it? It's still going to cause some rumblings. I mean, we've spoken to a number of backbench MPs ourselves today, and I would say probably 90% of them said that Mr Blair still hasn't done enough to sort out the issue of what's going to happen next. So they are going to be making trouble, aren't they? Well,
I think the thing I think is positive about conference, and this happens every year, there's always a lot of build-up. And what you get sometimes, a frustration I think for lots of party members, is that you get the disaffected voices dominating the media in the run-up to conference, and as if that speaks for the mainstream, for the soul of the Labour Party. And what always happens is, when you get to conference, you hear the true voice of Labour members, and I think what you will see is great affection for Tony Blair when he makes his speech, but I think you will also see huge interest and attention paid, as your correspondent rightly said, to the speeches made by others, and particularly also some very heated debates, I guess, not least in health.
So is he going to name the day?
Well, why should he? I mean, he's Prime Minister of this country. He said quite clearly that this conference speech will be his last, and I think for that reason alone, it will be quite a special moment actually for Labour Party supporters. I think most people look at Tony and they see somebody who's delivered us three fantastic victories, and actually coming here in Manchester I think is a brilliant moment, because this symbolises, to me anyway, more than anything, the difference Labour has made in this country. If you look at this city, it's vibrant in every single way, it is regenerated, it has got a future, and you can't say that under the Tories. So it's very fitting, and actually I think you'll see a lot of celebration of what we've achieved this week.
And you've been raising your eyebrows.
We've been raising our eyebrows at several points throughout that. I mean, I think where Andy Burnham is right is there's a fantastically sentimental or emotionally charged mood as they head up there. But that's partly because, you know, it's one of those horrible family parties where you don't know whether they're going to break the glasses, burst into tears or hug each other, or possibly all at once. This point about the leaving date is absolutely crucial to this. Of course they're celebrating Mr Blair's last conference, but they're also saying, you know, we love you so much, when are you going? And it's not true to say that it's only the disaffected minority or backbenchers causing trouble. I mean, if you look at, you know, just our paper this morning, Harriet Harman is saying she's been in direct communication with the Prime Minister about leaving date, and she is a minister, she is a senior minister.
Is Andy Burnham, there's no doubt, is there, that the party is divided? I mean, we've done our own poll on this, and we asked the question: the Labour Party is as divided now as the Tories were before they lost power in 1997, and 71% of people agreed with that. So no matter what you say about the unity and this only being a little bit of sort of mutterings at the edges, the public perceive the Labour Party to be really divided.
Well, I don't deny actually that we're under the spotlight next week, and I think the public will be looking very closely at how we behave, how we conduct ourselves, and I think the events of a couple of weeks ago did damage, because there you saw you know, a fantastic leader for Labour being treated in a shoddy way, and I don't think the public like that. And actually, I just don't think Anne's right there. Actually, I think if you listen to the voice of members in constituencies like mine, they do not like to see the kind of thing that happened a few weeks ago. They do not like to hear the disaffected voices claim to speak for everybody. Yes, of course,
there are different voices. This is the point.
There are different views around. And it's not a case that everybody feels exactly the same way. But I think if you were to tap into the broad mainstream of the Labour Party, people want to see the next few months played out properly, with some respect, with some dignity, and a proper transition of power.
I think the truth is that almost everybody's disaffected. It's just a question of who they're disaffected with. And what we'll definitely see, because I worked at Conservative Central Office during some big divisions and some conferences that were pretty turbulent. And what happens is that on the stage you get these big speeches and everyone applauds it, partly because they're trying to boo the media by applauding their own leaders. And so you'll definitely get the big ovations for Gordon Brown, the big ovations for Tony Blair. And behind the scenes, everybody everybody will be giving to journalists their own briefings about what they think about the various leadership candidates, and they won't be particularly flattering. So the members will be perplexed. Why do they see these fantastic shows on the stage, and yet the media is reporting something different, and they'll say they're not at the same conference? Well, that's true in a way. They're at a conference where they're being briefed all the time by major players.
Leadership questions aside, Andy Burnham, you're a health minister. You're at the sharp end of Blair's reforms to the health service. We've got the strike today by Unison, another one planned for next week, a possible NEC vote, we're told, against more privatisation in the NHS. Do you think you can carry on with these reforms? What kind of reception are you going to get to those reforms at the conference?
Well, I think it's an opportunity actually to go back to the beginning and explain what we've done with the National Health Service since we came to power. And the reason why waiting lists are at their lowest level for many, many, many years is because we've helped, the private sector have helped us reduce those waiting lists.
But you haven't the NHS is not behind you though, is it? The people who work for the NHS simply aren't behind you.
Well, I dispute that actually. I think yes, there's been a difficult year on the ground with some of the financial decisions we've had to take, and there is pressure on the National Health Service, as there is on the health system of any major developed country. It will cause difficult decisions at times, and people care passionately about the values of the National Health Service. We do too, I do too, and sometimes I think people can think, you know, is there some threat to those values in the offing? And perhaps it's an opportunity for us to restate our commitment to the National Health Service, but also say we want it to move with the times and deliver the very, very best care to the British people. And if it does that, that is the best way of cementing the National Health Service for decades to come.
Is it also an opportunity for Gordon Brown to say what he's going to do about the health service, whether or not he's going to carry on the privatisation? Do you think he will?
Well, you say carry on the privatisation. I mean, that just isn't happening. Where the health service can use the private sector to add to what it does, then that is the policy. I mean, the claim that there's huge swathes of the health service being simply privatised is utterly wrong. Well, I think the direction of travel has been set by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. They have led the reform programme in the National Health Service since Labour came to power.
Daniel?
We can show the benefits of it.
Daniel?
I agree that you're not privatising the National Health Service, but when, for many years, Labour Party was in opposition, the Tory Party put in place a policy of doing some very similar things, and you called it privatisation in very large adverts. So the argument then got going.
Danny,
so what's the difference between this?
Well, let me tell you the big difference.
Not on spending, on actually privatising.
The internal market that the Tories created allowed hospitals to compete on price, which they can't do under this system. There is a tariff, a national tariff for procedures. And the second thing was, it created a two-tier system. You were either with a fund-holding GP or a non-fund-holding GP. And not according to your need, you got differential access to the system based on who your GP was. Now,
I don't think it is privatisation.
The system we have today is anything like that, then I'm afraid you're sadly mistaken.
We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Andy Burnham, I'm sure we'll be talking to you a lot next week. Thank you very much for joining us. Well, that's all coming up. MP and Health Minister